outlining a speech. I thought I was just supposed to write out the whole thing and read it or memorize it. Well, not exactly. If you want to sound more conversational and be a little bit more natural in the delivery of your speech, you should probably speak from a keyword outline, also known as extemporaneous speaking. If you are giving an extemporaneous speech, you want to prepare outlines for the speech. I'm Dr. Heidi, and I am following the Pocket Guide to Public Speaking 7th edition presentational aid outline to share with you why and how to prepare outlines for speeches. You want to plan on creating 2 outlines. Now, that's what this textbook says. I don't necessarily agree. Now, if you're creating for a job or a business situation, you might not need more than 2 outlines. But as far as my coursework is concerned for the students that give speeches in my class, you're going to need 3 outlines. One of the outlines is called a working outline. It may also be called a preparation or a rough draft outline. It organizes and firms up your main points. It develops the supporting points to substantiate the points. And it really does contain your entire speech. This outline can be written on a piece of paper. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It can include your introduction, main point 1, 2, and 3, and then your conclusion. It also might include where you're going to include sources and other information that you deem is important to the speech that you will be giving. From here, I usually have my students type out the outline. Why do you type out the outline? Well, that's to turn into me as the instructor, so I can see that you did this piece, then you did a final copy of your speech, and then you also have a speaking outline, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But the other reason that you can do this is that you will be committing to memory, not necessarily memorizing, but committing to memory the parts of the speech that you want to include. Typing out an outline will help you to do this. According to the Pocket Guide, there's also the speaking outline, or the delivery outline, or note cards. It is used when practicing your speech, it can be used when delivering your speech, and it contains your ideas in condensed form. In other words, you are not writing out your speech in its entirety on your note cards. But why use note cards in the first place? Isn't that what this is for? Well, if you don't know how to elaborate on your presentational aids, if you don't have enough experience with the topic to tell us what the presentational aid is about without having extra notes, that's where these note cards come in handy. For my students, I ask them to use 5 note cards. And I ask them to only use white note cards. Why? Well, white note cards are the least distracting. If I was using hot pink or neon green or yellow note cards and they don't match my outfit, they are gonna stand out like a sore thumb. These white ones will blend in and people won't even notice you're using them. What do I put on these note cards? Well, first I put the introduction. Of course, I didn't add a whole lot of information here, but each line could contain a few key words. Next would be my first main point. Again, each line containing a few key words. Main point 2, main point 3, and my conclusion. Of course, really what I'm doing is transferring my outline to the note cards so that I am prepared to give a presentation. It's also cool because I have something to do with my hands, as long as I don't tap my note cards or flip them or write them in pencil so that they smudge and get all over my face. I recommend writing these in pen. Additionally, you want to use sentences, phrases, or keywords. If you are writing a sentence outline, that's going to state all of your points in sentence form, and it's going to use declarative sentences. Okay, so that's going to be on that rough draft, or for me, the final draft typed copy of the outline. And that's going to be full and complete sentences, but you're not writing out every single thought or every single word you're going to say. You're writing out each thought as a sentence. You can also use a phrase outline, which uses partial construction of sentences, and it also encourages familiarity with your speech. Again, nobody said you were supposed to memorize it or write it out in its entirety, which is known as a manuscript. This one is the best choice, a keyword outline. It uses the smallest possible units of understanding. Keywords are phrases, outlines, and they are recommended. Why? Because they allow for a stronger connection with the audience. It allows the speaker to look at the audience more, to provide greater freedom of movement, and to offer better control of thoughts and actions. Because you're using a keyword outline and you're taking the outline with you, you can move around, you can gesture to your presentational aid, but this shouldn't have all of the information for your presentation. In fact, I would actually put a picture on every slide or an image of some sort on every slide and limit the words to 20 per slide if this was my presentational aid. Why? Because this is supposed to aid in my presentation. This is my presentation and I am delivering it to you. You want to create the working outline first because it's a rough draft, right? So you can scribble, scratch, move things around. It allows you to prepare the body first, wait for the introduction and conclusion until the last, clearly indicate where credit is required, and you can assign a speech title. Although you won't stand up in front of the group and say, the title of my speech is, of course, that would be cheesy. But introduction and conclusion, why are they last? How do you introduce something you haven't even discussed yet? You haven't even written the speech. How do you know how to introduce it? Yeah, wait until the end, and then you can put the two ends of the speech together and tie it together for your listeners. When you prepare a speaking outline for delivery, use the working outlines numbering system. You can do that on here. Condense sentences into keywords and phrases. Write out direct quotations verbatim. Create the outline on note cards, paper, or in speaker's notes, software, program, or app. I don't allow my students to use paper. Why? Well, because it's kind of awkward to have to deal with a piece of paper. And especially if you're nervous, it can really get distracting. And isn't it awkward to see somebody giving a speech from their phone? Yeah. Thus, I've stuck with the standby, the old standard, the least expensive form, the note card. You can also use large, easy to read font in your delivery and include delivery cues. Capitalize and place them in parentheses. If you're writing it out on a note card, you can actually use a highlighter to help you remember which part of your speech you're covering and to help you follow along. You can also use your finger as you move along throughout the note cards. Now, we may discuss later on the other types of speeches. In this case, if you are reading from a manuscript or if you have memorized the information, it's also going to be important for you to sound like a conversationalist. So when I've been asked to read a speech that I have manuscripted, I do use bigger font and highlight every other line so that I know what I'm reading and it's easier to follow along. After you've practiced this for a while, you may not have to do that anymore, but it is a good idea for starter. Again, in this class and in most public speaking classes at college or university level, you're going to be asked to give an extemporaneous speech. So you don't want to memorize, manuscript, impromptu, any of those speeches. You also want to practice. Why do you want to practice a speech? Well, you want to practice a speech because if you're doing an extemporaneous delivery style, you'll want to know what those keywords on your note cards mean when you're giving the speech. If you want to be successful, you will practice being successful. Practice is particularly important with a keyword outline so you know where you're going to elaborate and when. The more you rehearse, the more comfortable you will be when you speak. The speech may not be exactly the same every time you give it. That's okay. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. You just want to make sure you provide the same information each time. Your first main point, your second main point, and your third main point. You want to provide the information that is the same. It doesn't have to come out in the same exact words as you wrote it in. Presentational aids are important to a speech, as you could see there. But more important is outlining and organizing your speech, using the introduction, body, and conclusion, and using different types of outlines for different reasons.